Israel reigniting the war in Gaza this Tuesday night. What's behind the deadly bombardment breaking a 2-month ceasefire? Israel's ominous new warning and what families of hostages are dreading. Russia rejects the ceasefire deal Ukraine agreed to, what Moscow wants Kyiv to give up. Temperatures are warming up, but Canadian real estate is not.
The spring housing market is dead on arrival.
What's keeping away buyers? And from 9 months in orbit to splashdown.
Crew 9 back on Earth.
The happy homecoming for 2 astronauts.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. Israel has resumed its war on Gaza, launching a wave of aerial attacks and shattering a fragile ceasefire with Hamas. And tonight, Israel's prime minister says he intends to change the face of the Middle East. Israeli fighter jets began hitting Gaza overnight. More than 400 people are dead. That's according to Gaza's health ministry, including women and children. Hamas accuses Israel of breaking the ceasefire deal and putting the lives of hostages at risk. Israel accuses Hamas of rejecting mediation offers. The return to violence is being widely condemned. Redmond Shannon has our top story tonight and a warning. Some of the images in it are graphic.
Burying one of the smallest victims of Tuesday's airstrikes on Gaza. This infant among the hundreds Hamas says were killed by Israeli bombs. Hospitals and morgues in Gaza overwhelmed. Families overcome. This boy says he saw his uncle's body dismembered. Hamas says senior officials were killed, but many children too, in this, the largest Israeli bombardment since the start of the January ceasefire. Israel has not allowed aid into Gaza for 2 weeks and has now ordered an evacuation of a large area inside its border fence, prompting fears of a new invasion. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says this is only the beginning, and that Israel will continue to use military pressure to force the release of the remaining hostages. But the families of those held by Hamas fear bombings push any chance of their freedom further away.
Basically, I'm terrified for the life of my 2 little brothers.
Some experts believe Hamas is reluctant to give up its few remaining bargaining chips.
The last thing that they can and want to do is to release the hostages.
But Avi Melamed says Israel's goal of totally wiping out Hamas is also unrealistic.
The outcome of the bottom line is that we see the continuation of this tragic loop with the very severe possibility it will further escalate.
On Tuesday, far-right Israeli politician Itamar Ben-Gvir rejoined Israel's government. He quit in January in protest against the ceasefire. Donna?
Redmond Shannon in London. Thanks, Redmond. The full ceasefire deal Ukraine has agreed to after being pressured by the U.S. has been rejected by Russia's president. Vladimir Putin spent more than 90 minutes on the phone with the American president today. Donald Trump had hoped Putin would agree to an immediate end to fighting on land, sea and in the air. Putin did not do that. Jackson Proskow explains what Putin did agree to, what he's demanding, and where this leaves Ukraine.
Their nearly 2-hour-long phone call ended with a vague agreement that the war in Ukraine should end with a lasting peace, with negotiations to start immediately. How U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin get there is another matter. Putin agreed to stop attacking energy targets for the next 30 days, falling short of the U.S.-backed 30-day unconditional ceasefire Ukraine previously agreed to. What's more, the Kremlin said any lasting peace must see the complete halt of foreign military aid and intelligence sharing with Ukraine, and must address what Putin called the root causes of the crisis. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said even a partial ceasefire would be a step toward peace, but warned Moscow was seeking to weaken Kyiv with its demands.
I think it's absolutely a dangerous precedent, in part because it deflects away from the fact that this war is a result of Vladimir Putin's Russia invading its neighbor.
Trump described the call as productive. Left unsaid is what concessions the U.S. may ultimately demand from Kyiv, after long hinting Ukraine should be prepared to give up territory.
Returning to Ukraine's pre-2014 borders is an unrealistic objective.
Exactly 11 years after Russia annexed Crimea, there are reports Trump has weighed recognizing the peninsula as Russian territory, though he has not announced any formal decision.
He would be immediately giving up perhaps the most important negotiating card.
For now, European leaders will only call the Trump-Putin talk a good start, but warn Ukraine must have a seat at the negotiating table for there to be a lasting peace, a sentiment echoed by Ukraine. Jackson Proskow, Global News, Washington.
4 NATO members have announced plans to withdraw from a key international treaty banning anti-personnel landmines, citing the rising threat from Russia and its ally Belarus. Poland and the Baltic states of Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania say threats from Russia have increased, and it's essential their troops have flexibility and freedom of choice to defend NATO's eastern flank. The Ottawa Treaty, known as the Mine Ban Treaty, came into force in 1997. It's been signed by more than 160 countries with a goal to ban mines aimed at humans, though major military powers, including China, the U.S. and Russia, never signed it. The UN estimates Ukraine is now the most mined nation in the world.
The world is changing. Our adversaries are increasingly emboldened. Canada is strong, and it's going to get stronger. We can give ourselves more than anything that President Trump or other trade partner can take away.
That's Prime Minister Mark Carney, who stopped in Iqaluit on his way home from Europe and announced plans to boost Canada's military footprint in the Arctic, saying Canada cannot and should not look to others first to defend the country. Mercedes Stephenson explains what he's promising and why.
5 days into his new job, Prime Minister Mark Carney arrived in the Canadian North, pledging to do more for this country's sovereignty and security.
Arctic sovereignty is a strategic priority of our government.
The first step, a partnership with Australia to build a Canadian version of their over-the-horizon radar system, an Australian system that Canadian officials say is the most advanced in the world.
The over-the-horizon radar system will enable Canada to detect and respond to both air and maritime threats over our Arctic faster and from further away.
The evolving threat of Russian and Chinese military capabilities, including hypersonic missiles that travel at 10 times the speed of sound, have made the need for an advanced radar system more urgent. Canadian officials say the Australian system can be built quickly and operational by 2029. Neither the promise of an advanced radar system nor the $6 billion the government has set aside are new, though. Both were announced as part of NORAD modernization by the Trudeau government in 2022, well under pressure from the Biden administration to do more to shore up Arctic security. Pressure that has increased in recent months under threats from Donald Trump about Canada's north.
International institutions and norms that have kept Canada secure are now being called into question. Our United States priorities, once closely aligned with our own, are beginning to shift.
The military will also receive $420 million in new money to launch military exercises that will amp up Canada's year-round military presence in the north.
Our government recognizes that while Canada must be strong in our partnerships, particularly NORAD, we cannot and should not look first to others to defend our nation.
Realistically, Canada is many years and hundreds of billions of dollars away from being able to defend ourselves without the help of others. Prime Minister Mark Carney acknowledged the need for more defense spending, but he would not say when that might come or how much. Mercedes Stephenson, Global News, Iqaluit.
There's new data ahead of an expected federal election call, possibly this week. It shows the Liberals, under new leader Mark Carney, have rebounded and appear to have enough support to form a majority government. Polling done by Ipsos for Global News asked, which party would you lean towards if a federal election were held tomorrow? 42% of respondents said the Liberals, 36% chose the Conservatives, 10% the NDP. A couple of other recent opinion polls have shown the same trend. The Conservative lead has evaporated. Now, these are opinion polls, not vote counts, and the campaign, when it happens, will matter. Mackenzie Gray looks at what's at play right now.
Let's bring it home. Thank you very much.
Ahead by nearly 20 points in 2024, the Conservatives looked like they were cruising to victory.
The good news is that life wasn't like this before Trudeau, and it won't be like this after he's gone.
But Justin Trudeau's departure as Prime Minister,
Canada only works as a state,
and Donald Trump's trade war have led to one of the fastest shifts in modern Canadian political history. New polling by Ipsos for Global News shows the Liberals ahead of the Conservatives by 6%.
Based on the numbers that we're seeing in our polling at the moment, the Liberals would be knocking on the door for a majority.
But it's not just one poll. Two others from the past 24 hours show the trend is Mark Carney's friend. Leger has the Liberals ahead by 3 points, and Angus Reid has them up by 5%, as the NDP hemorrhage progressive voters to the new Prime Minister.
A lot of those left of center voters are now thinking slightly differently. They're thinking less about how mad they were at Justin Trudeau and thinking more about stopping Pierre Poilievre.
These are the Liberals' best numbers since 2016, but polling shows there's room for more movement, with only half of Liberal voters very committed to them compared to 2/3 for the Conservatives.
It will basically come down to who does the better job of defining Mark Carney. Pierre Poilievre, who is already pretty well defined for Canadians, or Mark Carney defining himself.
The Tories, who have a significant fundraising advantage, have been relentlessly attacking Carney.
Carney even moved his company's headquarters to New York.
But have focused less on Donald Trump. Multiple polls show over 40% of Conservative voters have positive feelings towards the president, leaving Poilievre to try and focus on other issues.
The Liberals have the advantage in terms of Trump and tariffs right now. On any other issue like crime and immigration, we see the Conservatives leading on those issues.
The Liberals are now leading in suburban Toronto and Quebec, two key areas that are likely to decide who the next Prime Minister is, Donna. But with Election Day expected in late April or early May, the campaign ahead could have even more political shifts.
Okay, Mackenzie Gray in Ottawa, thank you. There are a couple of new indicators about spending. Inflation in Canada jumped last month. Canada's annual inflation rate rose to 2.6% in February. That's up from 1.9% in January. The sharp spike was driven largely by the end of the temporary federal tax holiday. And elbows up and buy Canadian seem to be more than just slogans. The number of Canadians crossing the border to the U.S. is down sharply. U.S. Customs and Border Protection data shows just over 2.2 million passenger vehicles entered the U.S. from Canada last month. That's nearly 500,000 fewer than those who made the trip in February of 2024. The last time the numbers were this low was the spring of 2022, when pandemic-related travel restrictions were still in place. In the U.S., there has been a rare public rebuke of President Trump by the Chief Justice of the American Supreme Court. Justice John Roberts called out Trump after Trump called a federal judge who ruled against his deportation plans a radical left lunatic, a troublemaker, an agitator, and said the judge should be removed from the bench. After that, Justice Roberts wrote, "Impeachment is not an appropriate response to disagreement concerning a judicial decision." Spring is around the corner, and that usually means the housing market heats up. Not this year. Coming up, what's putting off buyers? Warm temperatures and spring rains are causing early flooding in many parts of Quebec. In Drummondville, at least 150 homes are at risk. The river is about 5 times higher than average for this time of year. And in the town of Beauceville, south of Quebec City, an ice jam on the river has forced officials there to impose a boil water advisory. Well, spring is typically when Canada's housing market heats up, but this year appears to be a different story. Uncertainty is hanging over the market, driven in large part by President Trump's trade war. As Anne Gaviola reports, there is a silver lining for some homebuyers.
In my opinion, the spring housing market is dead on arrival.
It wasn't supposed to be this way. 7 rate cuts in a row from the Bank of Canada set the stage for a hot spring housing market.
Tariff fears are the largest influence on what's happening in today's housing market.
When you can't plan for the next 6 months, it's really hard to take on a 25-year mortgage.
But the so-called Trump effect is raining on that parade, keeping many buyers on the sidelines as people worry about a potential recession and what their job situation might be in a few months.
Even these are guys who were initially pre-approved and ready to purchase a home. And now they're like, hey, we really need to sit down and see what's going to happen here before we do anything.
Home sales in Canada declined 10.4% annually in February, according to the Canadian Real Estate Association, and the average price of a home dropped 3.3%. New listings fell 12.7% month over month. Borrowing costs are coming down and bidding wars a thing of the past. So it's a buyer's market for those ready to pull the trigger.
We're able to negotiate and get a lower price, and sometimes even reset the expectations for the sellers, because these properties have been sitting in the market for 30 plus days.
Buyers have the chance right now to renew their mortgages at a lower rate than they would have a year ago.
Condo inventory is quite high right now. Condos have seen an enormous slump really over the past 6 months or so. And that tends to be the home type of choice for first-time buyers.
And there are deals as new builds are completed at the expense of those who bought pre-construction when home values were higher.
Because the price that they paid versus what it is today, there's such a huge gap. Most of them are forced to walk away, leaving their entire deposits. We're talking about 200K worth of ardent money that people have saved up.
Creating opportunities to capitalize, because history shows that slow markets do eventually pick up.
We don't know what to expect at this point, and we don't have a crystal ball. But at the same time, that's when people make their money in real estate.
Anne Gaviola, Global News, Toronto.
Ahead, the story behind a treasured library book returns 64 years after it was due. At least 12 people were killed when a plane went down off the Caribbean coast of Honduras late last night. A popular musician is among the dead. 5 people on board were rescued. Their plane crashed into the sea about a minute after takeoff, and the cause is under investigation. This is what 3 weeks of rain in parts of southern Spain has caused. Evacuation orders have been issued for nearly 400 homes. Several rivers have burst their banks, and water levels in some are still rising. At least 3 people are missing. The region is still recovering from record flooding in October that killed more than 200 people. Hungary's parliament has passed a law banning LGBTQ+ pride events, including the Budapest Pride March that attracts thousands of people every year. The law is the latest rollback of rights and protections by President Viktor Orban's party. It prompted a protest outside Parliament. It gives authorities the power to use facial recognition software to identify those who attend gay-themed events. Critics compare it to fascism and say the ban turns back the clock in Hungary by undermining hard-won rights. In the UK, the last surviving pilot who flew in the Battle of Britain has died. His name is John Paddy Hemingway. He was 105. Hemingway was a member of what then Prime Minister Winston Churchill called the few, those brave and skilled pilots who defended the UK from German air raids in 1940. The Battle of Britain was Nazi Germany's first major defeat in the Second World War. Returning to Earth next, the extraterrestrial homecoming, months in the making. This camping survival book is back at the University of British Columbia's library for the first time in nearly 65 years. A student borrowed it back in 1960. Robert Murray says he kept it because it had lots of practical advice and says what he learned helped save him and his son while they were out in the backcountry. When Murray decided to return it, he says he was a bit nervous about being charged a hefty late fee.
I did a calculation of what 2 cents a day at 3% for 64 years would be, and I didn't like the answer. So I made them an offer.
He made them an offer. When he mailed the book back, along with the letter, he included a $100 check. Well, UBC got rid of library late fees back in 2020, thank goodness, and says Murray's donation will be used to cover other backlogged fees. The book is still in good condition and will soon be back in the library's circulation.
And splashdown, Crew 9 back on Earth.
And there you have it, a SpaceX Crew 9 Dragon capsule splashing down off the coast of Florida. Inside, 4 astronauts, including Americans Sonny Williams and Butch Wilmore, the 2 who found themselves on an extended stay on the International Space Station. Their Boeing Starliner craft ran into problems after arrival last June. Mike Armstrong explains why it took so long to bring them home and the toll that mission has taken on their bodies.
Posing for some final photos.
There's a word NASA insists doesn't apply to astronauts Butch Wilmore and Sonny Williams. They were never, it says, stranded.
aboard Freedom.
The pair's stay was extended, but there was always a way to bring them home. The problem was it would have cost millions.
Undock sequence commanded.
And they were very happy where they were.
Space is where we're supposed to be, where we're supposed to work. It just made perfect sense. It was more efficient to wait and to bring them down now.
Let's get going.
When the pair lifted off last June, it was supposed to be an 8-day test mission. It turned into 286. Their Boeing Starliner spacecraft first had thruster problems during docking, then a helium leak. The decision was made to leave them.
Happy Thanksgiving to all our friends and family.
Wilmore and Williams would orbit the Earth more than 4,500 times and miss a bunch of things down on the surface.
Welcome to the International Space Station as we get ready for the Christmas holidays.
It looks probably a little cramped.
Now, the two went up knowing an extended stay was possible. They've been kept busy, folded in as full members of the crew. They've done spacewalks, conducted research, and worked on repairs while they've missed their families. They've tried to focus on the opportunity.
Being in space is a lot of fun. You can look at things a lot differently when you're up in space.
One thing that's been a big part of their stay is exercise. Living without gravity takes a toll on the body. The treadmills also provided time to disconnect from work, and a lot of it.
They have on their calendar at least 6 days a week of exercise that in total lasts about 2.5 hours a day.
And you can see her being helped.
After months in space, just about everything is affected, even balance and vision. The reunions with their loved ones won't be quite the way they would have liked them, but they're not likely to complain. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
And that is Global National for this Tuesday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada showcases Botwood, Newfoundland and Labrador, the BC Legislature in Victoria, and all of our country's provincial and territorial flags, along with the maple leaf flying in Winnipeg. Keep them coming. Send your pictures of Canadian pride to globalnational@globalnews.ca. And thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Bye-bye.